Round 11 here at GP Sacramento. Paul Rietzel alongside me, TJ Rogers, as we were watching Steve Rubin line up on the right against Hunter Cochran. Now, we saw each of these drafters actually early on, and they ended up on very similar color combinations, both of them a red-white deck, but the structure of the decks, very different, Paul.
Yeah, Steve is as we kind of harped on a bit during his draft, has a very high curve red-white deck. Hunter's much lower to the ground. Hunter, an abundance of 2-drops, including 3 copies of Viashino Pyromancer, 2 of the Cavalry Drill Master. He even goes down into 1-drops for Rustwing Falcon. So Hunter has much more of my style of Boros deck, extremely aggressive, low to the ground, try to get you dead quickly. Steve, we saw with 3 copies of Knightly Valor and much more of the high end, should dominate the late game. But Hunter, has a real good chance of getting Steve dead before Steve's able to deploy that.
Hunter off to a good start, too. On turn 2, deploys that Viashino Pyromancer. It gets in 2 damage for the triggered ability. It then attacks in the next turn and is followed up by a Pegasus Courser. No action yet from Steve Rubin. And now we're going to be able to see both of these creatures get up into the air because this Pegasus Courser's ability, when it attacks, another target attacking creature gains flying until end of turn. This Havoc Devil's able to swing back, but not going to be on blocking duty.
Right, yeah, and Steve's about to take 5 to the face right here now from the Cavalry Drill Master trigger, falling to 11, and this was the flaw that we said in Steve's deck, right? He doesn't really start his game often until turn 4, and now he's going to be finding himself on the back foot very early.
Yeah, Steve Rubin is down to 11. There are 3 creatures on the battlefield opposing, and he needs to find some way to really utilize this board because it's not a phenomenal blocker, this Havoc Devils, but is it even, is attacking what his primary game plan even wants to be right now?
Yeah, in this situation, right, he needs to deal with problem number 1, which is the Pegasus Courser.
Luminous Bonds comes down and does answer that, but it's a lightning strike from Hunter Cochran to take down the Havoc Devils, and it is going to be an open field for this Cavalry Drill Master and this Viashino Pyromancer. That's going to be 4 damage coming in. Steve Rubin down to 7.
Yeah, and Steve doesn't have great ways to get himself out of this.
Lava Axe 2? Even more of this aggression. Steve Rubin's down to 2. There are 2 lethal threats on this board, and we are just picking it up. What a blazing fast game 1. We're going to kick things off, Steve, with a mountain. That could not have gone better.
Yeah, and now we see Steve, very importantly draws one of his very few 2 and 3 drops, so he's able to get onto the battlefield with some defense early. This Suspicious Bookcase is absolutely critical to Steve's chances. It's basically a way for him to gain enough life and time so that it just doesn't get tempoed right out of the game.
Yep, and that Viashino Pyromancer coming down just like the last game. It deals that 2 damage in. We're now going to give it +2/+0 and first strike from this Cavalry Drill Master. It attacks in for 2. The Bookcase wants nothing to do with it, and Steve Rubin down to 14, familiar territory from last game.
Yeah, good start again for Hunter, but Steve seems to have some of the tools this game that he needs. A, the Bookcase is out there to be able to block, and then B, he's been able to ramp up quickly to 4 mana, and now as we know, Steve with no problem finding 4 drops. He has all the choices in the world when it comes to 4-drop creatures.
He's got Havoc Devils, Hostile Minotaur, and Dwarven Priest in his hand. He's going to lead with the Havoc Devils. 4 mana spells is not going to be a problem. So Luminous Bond comes down, eliminates that one. The attack in with each of these creatures. The Bookcase gets in front of the Drill Master. Viashino Pyromancer gets its 2 damage in. Steve Rubin down to 12 and able to play down this Gallant Cavalry, actually. So this is a nice card. It's going to have a 2/2 body attached to it, and it creates another 2/2.
Right, and certainly one of the most powerful cards against Hunter's board, and that's the weakness when you play these low-to-the-ground 2-mana 2/1 creatures, is that something like a Gallant Cavalry ends up making your creatures look fairly weak.
So we see a Tormenting Voice discarding a mountain, so maybe just trying to get rid of one of these lands that he really doesn't need in this deck. Then deploys a Goblin Motivator. It's a 1-mana 1/1 Goblin, but it's got this ability. It can tap. It can give another creature haste until end of turn.
Yeah, again, we mentioned Hunter goes all the way down to the 1-drops. Really strong when you draw them early in the game. Not as effective at play on turn 5.
Hostile Minotaur comes down for Steve Rubin. Back to Hunter, who is going to go for this Rustwing Falcon. Give it haste. Tap in 2 creatures to get in 1 damage.
Yeah, and look, Steve's in good shape, right? He's got bigger creatures. Hunter has been kind of stonewalled his main attack, but Steve is down to 11. We've seen Hunter has Lava Axe. He's got copies of Viashino Pyromancer. So Hunter could find a way to get this last 11 damage in, but certainly you have to like Steve's situation so far.
Hunter Cochran has actually been on a phenomenal run this most recent years. From 2016, he has had 4 Grand Prix top 8s. He is most recently in Grand Prix Memphis, and he actually even won Grand Prix Montreal back in 2016. So he's looking for another one today.
Yeah, 4 top 8s in the span of just over 2 years is pretty impressive stuff. Not easy to make top 8 in these huge field tournaments.
Knight of the Tusk comes down for Steve Rubin, and it is going to be Take Vengeance, eliminating the Hostile Minotaur. It is now a 3-7 and a 0-4, looking down a 1-2 and a 1-1. That's not the board state I expected. Knightly Valor, though. That's going to be making this Knight of the Tusk. We saw this actually earlier last round. This Knight of the Tusk was able to become now a 5-9. That's what kind of got the job done in the previous round for Steve Rubin. He's trying to bring it back.
Yeah, and certainly racing is something that Steve's deck is going to do really well, because at this point, every single card that he's going to be continuing to commit to the table is going to be more powerful than what Hunter is doing. So Hunter really wants to just get Steve dead. He doesn't want to get into one of those back and forth trading damage type situations. He wants to deal like a couple different chunks and then finish him off with a Lava Axe, because Steve's deck is much better equipped to enter this point in the game.
Yeah, and one thing that I think is notable is that against a red-white deck, a Knight of the Tusk with a Knightly Valor, a Vigilance 9 Toughness creature, is very difficult to answer.
Right, yeah. Hunter needs something like a Luminous Bonds or an Active Treason or something like that to get it out of the way.
So it's going to be the Dwarven Priest coming down to the battlefield, and for Steve Rubin, that's going to gain him a nice chunk of life as well. He's back up to 14 after gaining some life from this Knight of the Tusk, that Knight creature token, as well as the Suspicious Bookcase.
Yeah, 5 life here from Dwarven Priest. Almost gives Steve Rubin the check mark, right? He was well ahead with his more powerful creatures on the table, and Hunter's best path to victory was, again, something like Lava Axes and Mighty Leaps and some shenanigans to kind of sneak through that last couple points of damage. 5 life from Dwarven Priest is just a gigantic amount in this point in the game, and Hunter's going to have a lot of trouble now dealing with the size of Steve's creatures.
How much of this game really has been defined by the Suspicious Bookcase coming down on turn 2?
Yeah, it's big. Suspicious Bookcase and Gallant Cavalry are 2 cards that are pretty strong against a bunch of 2/1 creatures.
So that's going to be the win for Steve Rubin. It's heading into a Game 3, Mountain on both sides of the battlefield. Hunter Cochran, the much more aggressive deck and on the play in this Game 3, leads with that Viashino Pyromancer. It's been his favorite play on turn 2.
Yep. And that's a tough spot for Steve, right? So turn 2, if you have something like, for example, Goblin Instigator, that Viashino Pyromancer looks terrible. Instead, it's the Marauder's Axe, which is just absolutely terrible against other Boros decks. So Steve can't be happy about the way this is going.
And it's going to be another one of these Pyromancers coming down to the battlefield, as well as the attack for 2. So we have 2 of these enter the battlefield triggers, as well as the attack. Steve Rubin finds himself down to 14, and there are no creatures on the battlefield, but it is going to be Spit Flame to take down one of these Pyromancers, which had the +2/+0 and first strike, so able to actually eliminate 4 of the damage that was coming in.
Yeah, and Steve's doing okay. No third land, importantly, yet for Hunter. But Hunter still, from a tempo perspective, ahead on life total, has a bunch of creatures on the battlefield, and has Steve down to 12 already. He not scared of anything.
There's the attack in for 4, and I think I saw a Sure Strike lingering in this hand for Hunter Cochran.
Sure Strike, certainly the first card that pops into your head. Something like Mighty Leap would create a 2-for-1 situation, but Sure Strike allows you to attack with impunity here, so...
And there is the Sure Strike. That is going to deal 2 damage, eliminate that Havoc Devils, and Steve Rubin's going to find himself just taking another chip shot. Another Havoc Devils is going to come down to the battlefield. We saw him take quite a few of these ones during the drafting portion.
Yeah, and there is that third land for Hunter, Luminous Bonds, and Steve's down to 6. I mean...
Oh, man.
This is the flaw in Steve's deck, right? A bunch of 4-drops is just not good against... an opponent who's able to play a kind of that tempo-based game.
Hostile Minotaur comes down. It's on blocking duty. There's also 2 copies of Electrify in Steve Rubin's hand. So if he can find any way to just start stem the bleeding, if he can start just chipping away at those creatures on Hunter Cochran's side of the board, he might be able to stabilize and start moving forward with his game plan.
Yeah, but Steve down to 4. We already saw that Hunter Cochran has Lava Axe in his deck, right? So to be at 4 against an opponent with 4 lands out and a Lava Axe in their deck is a pretty scary place to be. And Steve would love to have something like Dwarven Priest to kind of get him out of that range right now.
Yeah, that Lava Axe is such a phenomenal amount of reach. 5 mana for 25% of their life.
Right.
It's
yeah, and certainly with Hunter able to chip in so much damage early, it's very easy to see a way.
And there's the Lava Axe. Hunter Cochran throws down the 5th mana. We see that Lava Axe come in, and that is going to be Hunter Cochran. A very fast round, taking down Steve Rubin, who is going to be falling to 9-2. Hunter Cochran moving up to 10-1. He's looking for that 5th Grand Prix top 8.
Yeah, and there I think we really saw both ends of the spectrum when you have kind of a low to the ground, go wide Boros versus more of that mid-range or slower Boros, that if the game goes really long, Steve's in great shape, but Hunter's deck really well equipped to get Steve dead quickly, and it happened in 2 out of 3 games as I think one might have expected.
Yeah, and one thing that we've been doing is that for each of these rounds, we're taking the card of the match, something that really defined that round for you. What do you think that was?
I think for me it's Viashino Pyromancer. I think that's the kind of card that we saw Steve Rubin pass up many, many times. It wasn't a card that he valued very highly. It's not even that strong of a card. I mean, Viashino Pyromancer, 2 mana, 2/1, enters the battlefield, 2 damage to target player. It's an objectively weak card, but in the specific strategy of this Boros, very aggressive, low to the ground, go wide, get you dead deck, it feels exactly the right role. And we saw it not only deal a lot of damage by attacking, but obviously the trigger ability as well, get Steve within range of Lava Axe in 2 out of the 3 games.
Yeah, and every single one of those games was led by a Viashino Pyromancer on turn 2. It was the play that he was very happy to make each and every single time. But here in round 11, there is going to be more magic on the way. I'm TJ Rogers, joined by Paul Rietzel, and we'll be right back with some more right after this. Welcome back, Grand Prix Sacramento. TJ Rogers here, joined by Paul Rietzel. It's still round 11. We've still got the draft club, but we have got more magic to show you here this round. Let's check out how Thiago Saporito was able to fare this match. So heading in, he's going to be up against Richard Lute. We just saw last round this deck put on quite the show. This is a powerful black-white deck.
Yeah, Richard is 10-0 and has, we were saying off camera, probably one of the better versions of the black-white deck that we've seen so far. In case you haven't seen this deck at home, black-white obviously with life gain synergies, so a bunch of cards that gain Richard life, and then rewards for that. 3 copies of Regal Bloodlord really being the highlight here.
So we see a Fountain of Renewal come down. Thiago Saporito, now if my memory serves correctly, he just played the Departed deckhand that we saw him choose over the Cleansing Nova that ended up in Richard Lute's deck.
Yeah, and Thiago, was able to win his first round, and we mentioned that his deck, it's basically a 5. It's a medium version of the deck. It's okay. Certainly nothing that he's ecstatic about. But we mentioned, when you start off 9-0, you really just need to get that 2-1 finish, and obviously getting that first round, he's still in great shape.
Yep, Richard Lute's side of the battlefield, that Fountain of Renewal, it's going to gain 1 life each upkeep. Later, he can cash it in for a card. And we've also got the Skymarch Bloodletter. That's the 2/2 for 3 that when it enters the battlefield drains 1 life. It's got that flying ability as well. Thiago Saporito with a Departed deckhand can't be blocked except by spirits. There's not a whole lot of those in this format. Also can give that to other creatures for 4 mana. And a Shield Mare, which was able to gain a little bit of life and might be able to going forward.
Yeah, I've really liked the Fountain of Renewal. It was a card that I did not think would be good when it was initially when I saw the previews for Magic 2019, but especially in these sort of white-black decks, not only does it buy you a ton of time, but synergizes so well with so many different types of cards. Really a nice role player in that deck.
So the Skymarch Bloodletter able to get in a Shield Mare joining Richard's side of the battlefield, and we have got Thiago untapping Exclusion Mage, Departed deckhand, Shield Mare. That 2/3 lining up against the opposing 2/3, and it's just going to be an attack all out. There's only 1 blocker. We're going to make a stand here, give all these creatures +1/+0 and indestructible. That's going to end up giving that boost not only to the Exclusion Mage to where it doesn't die, but actually additional damage coming from the other side of the board, 6 total.
Yeah, and the certainly a nice tempo play for Thiago. Richard, fine with that trade as well, trading 1 for 1. And you notice, even though Thiago's been curving out perfectly, attacking every single turn due to the life gain from basically every card that Richard has played, he's still at 17 despite all of the attacks that Thiago's made. So, Thiago obviously with a nice start here, but Richard now getting into the phase of the game where he can start deploying his more powerful cards and has bought himself a ton of time.
And we see Richard Lute attacking in. This looks like there's the Cleansing Nova in hand.
Yeah, Cleansing Nova possibility. Thiago's board can be absolutely.
We're fine with it. 2-headed zombie is going to come down to the battlefield. This is the 4/2 with Menace, and it looks like Richard Lute maybe just trying to be patient with that Cleansing Nova. Save it for a situation where he's really behind.
Yeah, right now it would just gain him kind of a 3 for 2, a little bit of card advantage. I think he'd rather wait until Thiago has to commit more to the board.
Okay, and we're going to see that Gargoyle Sentinel come down to the battlefield. That's going to be that 3/3 defender. Later in the game, it could get up into the air and get aggressive. Otherwise, that Fountain of Renewal continuing to just be a phenomenal source. Richard Lute's been taking plenty of damage, but still at 14, like you said.
Still at 14, and I wonder if maybe you see a turn coming up here where he sacrifices the Fountain of Renewal, kind of pump faking like he needs to try to find action, which might incentivize Thiago to add even another creature to the board and kind of set him up for the Cleansing Nova.
What a signal that would be.
Yeah, it's kind of an advanced maneuver, but something that certainly Richard is capable of.
And we do have a copy of that Regal Bloodlord in hand. That's going to come down. This is the 2/4 with flying. Each end step, if you did gain life, you get to make a 1/1 flying bat. That Fountain of Renewal is a guaranteed source of it. It doesn't even care if you gained the life while the Regal Bloodlord was on the battlefield. It only checks if you did this turn.
Right, and an interesting decision point there for Richard. he basically is saying, okay, I'm going to use Cleansing Nova as a backup play on this game. It's not going to be my plan A. I can just beat you with these creatures. So it's a tough moment. Once you commit, obviously, the Regal Bloodlord to the battlefield, you're saying, all right, I'm holding this Cleansing Nova. I do not want to cast it if I can possibly avoid it.
We see that life gain at the upkeep. Gallant Cavalry coming down for Tiago Saporito. So we've got a 2-2 with Vigilance, a 2-2 with Vigilance. We've got this Departed Deckhand, which has just been chipping away the Exclusion Mage that's been hanging back, as alongside that Shield Mare and the Gargoyle Sentinel on Richard's side of the battlefield. A Regal Bloodlord alongside a Bat, which came down last turn, a Sky March Bloodletter, and that two-headed zombie, which has also not been doing a whole lot. It's just 4 power that's been sitting on defense.
Yeah, and interestingly, Tiago, the white-blue player, is not very well equipped to deal with a flying attack right now. His only creature capable of blocking a flyer on the table is Gargoyle Sentinel. So Richard, I think, obviously wants to be careful of something like an Inspired Charge on Tiago's next turn, but really can be pretty aggressive here with his attack since he knows he's going to be getting another bat on his own end step.
Yeah, and that Gargoyle Sentinel unable to block this turn because you actually need to invest that 3 mana to have it both lose Defender and gain flying.
Right.
Boy, that Cleansing Nova looks pretty good as a backup plan, doesn't it?
Yeah, it's always tough to play these sort of these Wrath of God effects like Cleansing Nova, because you don't want to not commit more to the board when you could press your advantage and potentially just win the game.
And we see 5 damage come in through the air. A Child of Night hits the battlefield, and at the end step, we're going to gain that bat because that life that we gained at the very beginning of the turn with that Fountain of Renewal, as long as the Regal Bloodlord and that Fountain of Renewal are still on the battlefield, that's going to be a big way to accrue that advantage. Worth noting, we see Tiago getting aggressive. This Child of Night, if it blocks, Richard will gain life from the defense from that lifelink. That will lead to more of that trigger getting those bat tokens.
Yeah, and even if Tiago had something like Inspired Charge here, this would not be a lethal attack, and Richard can make attacks, can make blocks here that are very speculative because he has the backup plan of the Cleansing Nova. So
So a 4-2 getting in front of the 2-3, those are going to trade. We see the 2-1 with Lifelink getting in front of the 2-2 Exclusion Mage. We see the 1-1 Bat getting in front of the Gallant Cavalry. That one does not kill the Cavalry. So 2 cards down for Tiago, 3 cards down for Richard, though one of them was a token. And because of that Lifelink, I think we're going to have another Bat entering the battlefield. So actually netting another card, replacing that Bat that was lost.
Yeah, and Tiago under some life total pressure here now. It's a really tough situation. He does not have a great answer to the Regal Bloodlord or the Sky March Bloodletter. Eventually, yes, he could potentially try to set up a block with Gargoyle Sentinel, but he can't just sit there and pass the turn with 3 mana untapped every turn. He's got to kind of continue to develop his game plan. So Richard's kind of in amazing shape.
Yep, Tiago double checking. That is at the beginning of each end step. We do see a Thopter coming down from this Aviation Pioneer. So we have got a 2-4 in the air, 2 of these 1-1s, the 2-2 Bloodletter, and I think we just drew a Murder. So
wow.
That is going to be that's good removal.
Yeah, and if Tiago ever does get a situation where he leaves mana up for Gargoyle Sentinel, then he's going to get punished with that Murder. So, a nice clean attack here for 5 coming in. And I think the reason why Richard's just being so careful is he's thinking about something like Inspired Charge, right? You want to make sure that you don't just randomly die out of nowhere.
Yeah, at the moment there's a baseline of 11 damage that could have the backswing with the 3-mana investment into the Gargoyle Sentinel, still 8 without it, but something like that Inspired Charge would be far more than enough to actually get lethal damage coming in.
Right. So, Richard wants to just navigate this fairly carefully. He's going to get a bat on end step. He wants to make sure that he's continuing to obviously pressure Tiago's life total. You don't want to just let him back into the game.
And Macabre Waltz coming down, and that is going to get back a couple of these tools. We saw a Child of Night, and I believe the Shield Mare were the 2 grabs. One of them defensively able to get more of those bats. That Shield Mare gains 3 life immediately upon entering the battlefield. Both of those really able to buffer that life total in the racing situation.
Yeah, and wouldn't surprise me at all if he actually discarded Cleansing Nova here. He does not want to. End up destroying his own Regal Bloodlord, which is providing him the repetitive source of bats.
So we're going to see those. The Thopter is just going to trade off with a bat. Otherwise, it's going to be 4 damage that successfully gets across. This other bat hanging back, joined by another. So there are 2 blockers currently, and we did not see anything from Richard to follow up that play, keeping up the murder, I believe. We did see that Cleansing Nova get discarded.
Yeah, and I'm a little surprised that never mind. Richard just has Tiago dead here. He just wants to be careful with the math. It has murder for the Angel. He can make a few blocks or whatever, and he can very comfortably has 5 damage coming back. But a little surprised he didn't just commit more to the board, but Richard has Tiago here just going through the math.
So Angel of the Dawn does come down to the battlefield. It is a 3/3 that with flying when it enters the battlefield, these other creatures are going to gain vigilance. They're going to gain +1/+1. They attack in. The murder takes it down, and that is going to be Richard coming away with the win. Heading into game 2, Tiago is going to kick things off with his blue-white deck. A little bit of artifact synergies, but they didn't come together quite as well up against Richard Liu. Again with the Fountain of Renewal in this really well put together black-white synergy life gain deck.
Yeah, I mean both players have, a lot of the synergistic kind of cornerstones of their deck, but Richard was able to find a lot of the really key uncommons, the gold uncommons and the rares that give him that power level that we said Tiago was missing, and we saw one of those key cards being one of the Regal Bloodlords that led him to a Game 1 victory, and unfortunately it looks like Tiago suffering from pretty severe mana problems here.
Shieldmare getting in a swing that did gain 3 life when it came down to the battlefield. Now it's a 2/3 attacker, followed up by a 2-headed zombie that is going to get dispersed by Tiago. Remind me again, how many of those Regal Bloodlords are in this deck?
3 Regal Bloodlords, yeah. About as good of a version of Black-White as you could imagine.
Wow, so the Shieldmare gets in, knocks Tiago down to 16. We are going to play that one down, and that's just going to be a handshake from Tiago. That Regal Bloodlord unstoppable with the Fountain of Renewal, and that was just too much to be seen here. Richard Liu takes down both games very nicely and looking pretty brilliant heading into the next round as well.
Yeah, nice to be an 11-0, and for Tiago, smart move to not waste any of your luck right there against one of the best decks you're going to face all day. He suffered a little bit landlight in game 1, very landlight in game 2, but the truth is he could have had excellent draws and probably still been an underdog against Richard's deck.
So it's time to jump over to the third match that we had. This is Table C. It's going to be Max Mick up against Tim Alfred. We saw Tim actually take game 1, so now we're joining back in, catching up with them as they're entering into this game 2. It's Druid of the Cal coming down for Max. Tim also on a green strategy, and it's going to be the Dryad Greenseeker, both very powerful 2-mana green cards.
Yeah, both have pretty nice green decks, and we mentioned green being one of the strongest colors here in Core Set 2019. Tim has access to an Ajani Adversary of Tyrants in his deck, as well as kind of the traditional green-white aggressive creatures. Pretty nice deck here from Tim Alfred. Max with green-blue, which is more of a mid-range and ramp strategy, and nice version as well.
So we saw the attack in with that Druid of the Cal into the Dryad Greenseeker, just kind of testing the waters a little bit. It does get in 1 damage against Tim, who is unwilling to put that Greenseeker on the line. A Departed Deckhand to follow it up, and Tim is going to be playing down a Marauder's Axe. So that is going to have the ability to pay 2 mana, equip it to a creature. It'll give it +2/+0, but Max follows up with a Vigilant Baloth. 5 mana for a 5/5 with Vigilance joining the Departed Deckhand.
Yeah, and nice play by Max attacking the Druid of the Cowl into a Dryad Greenseeker. Max doesn't actually have access to anything like Titanic Growth in his deck. That was a kind of a bluff, but it was a free roll attack, right? Knowing that Dryad Greenseeker is such a valuable creature that Max figures, let me get an attack in. My opponent's not going to want to risk his valuable card advantage creature, and so sneak in that point, and hey, every point counts.
Yeah, absolutely. And now with that Vigilant Baloth, it's going to be interesting seeing that combined with the Departed Deckhand. For 4 mana, you can make it to where it can't even be blocked. We see that Marauder's Axe go to the Dryad Greenseeker, and Exclusion Mage comes down, gets it right back to the hand, eliminating that as a blocker, and we see 1, 2, 3, plus the 5, 8 damage coming in. Tim Alfred finds himself down to 9 life, looking down an impressive board, and that is going to be the win. So, 1-1. These players are entering into Game 3. Both players 9-1 on the day. So a win gets them closer to the top 8. A loss puts them sort of on the precipice.
Yeah, and both players with really nice 2-drops here. Thorn Lieutenant and Departed Deckhand. Both players going to be really happy with that start.
Yeah, that Thorn Lieutenant, a 2/3 for 2 mana, and as the game goes on, you can pay 6 mana to give it a pretty significant boost in power and toughness. Also, anytime that it's targeted, it's going to replace itself, which it's often targeted by removal spells, if anything.
Yeah, and unfortunately, we see another game where a player has missed a third land drop, which is, it happens, but Tim is going to want to find that third mana sooner rather than later.
Yep, so we see the Departed Deckhand trading blows with this Thorn Lieutenant. Notably, it is only the time when it is targeted by a spell. An ability, something like the Exclusion Mage, would not do so, but this Disperse is going to end up pretty nice, except we are going to be bouncing the Marauder's Axe, not the Thorn Lieutenant itself, cutting that down to just the 2 damage and not providing that 1/1. A Bristling Boar comes down to the battlefield as a 4/3 that can get in the way of this Thorn Lieutenant, and the Departed Deckhand is going to continue chipping away.
Yeah, really nice play with the Disperse by bouncing the equipment against a mana-light opponent and Tim. The Axe, you have to replay it, then find another 2 mana, put it on another creature. Max, obviously, with a blue-green deck, has potentially more bounce or more interaction, so huge amount of tempo gain by that Disperse, and more than happy to be down a card.
Totally lost eliminating this Daggerback Basilisk, which just came down to the battlefield, and this is going to be a swing in. Can't get in front of that Departed Deckhand because it cannot be blocked except by Spirits, so this is going to be a hit for 6. Tim finds himself down to 10. Max still at a pretty comfortable 16 up against this Thorn Elemental, and we know what Tim's drawing this turn.
Yeah, and Totally Lost is a card that I happen to like quite a bit. I've seen a lot of really world-class players cut that from their decks or not value it very highly at all. Obviously, it shines in games where your opponent's a little bit mana light, but I think that the ability to remove a threat from the table and not be down a card is very valuable.
So we attack in with the Bristling Boar. The Daggerback Basilisk throws itself in front of it. A quick trade there that is followed up by Colossal Dreadmaw, the 6/6 with Trample for 6, joining that Departed Deckhand. That Daggerback Basilisk no longer able to get in the way of it because it did get thrown in front of that Bristling Boar. So Max Mick looking pretty solid right now.
Yeah, and he's going to be a little bit suspicious here, right? Tim passed with all 4 mana up, did not replay the Axe. So what potential options could Tim have with 4 mana? I think that
it's not going to be able to get blocked except by Spirits. We're using that Departed Deckhand's activated ability. 4 mana. Target creature cannot be blocked except by Spirits. And that is also just a regular ability of the Departed Deckhand. So these are both functionally unblockable for this combat, and this is an attack in for lethal, and that is going to be Max Mick taking down this game in 3. We saw Tim Alfred come up with the initial game win when we joined that match, but just 2 very swift games from Max, taking away the full match, and he's going to be heading in with another win into round 12.
And I think what we saw right there, we mentioned blue versus some of these white-green decks. White-green considered by a lot of players to be one of the stronger archetypes, but cards like Disperse, Exclusion Mage, Totally Lost are really effective against white-green, which is trying to augment its creatures with equipment and auras. And so the Disperse on the Axe, the Totally Lost on the blocker, obviously, Tim being a little bit mana light, and Max really showing exactly, what the blue-green deck is supposed to do in that matchup. And if you noticed at the end there, while they were kind of having their post-game chat, Max was de-sleeving Disperses. So, neither of those Disperses were main deck cards for Max. He sideboarded them in, knowing the role that he was supposed to play in the matchup.
Phenomenal play, understanding what it is that you need to be doing. Of course, we are going to have more Magic after this. That is going to round it up for this one, but we're going to have more Magic coming for you right after this.